We are live.
Life
Oh,
again.
welcome back. Yes, welcome back, fellow seekers. It's 2021, and it's time to do another deep dive into something contentious. Yes. But always with some balance and purpose. Yeah. So. I'm trying to get to grips with a new year, yeah. But man, it's so much on my mind. I don't know about you, my friend. But I've been feeling a little bit anxious, perhaps you could say, about where things are heading. I wonder if it's any different for you, but certainly over here in the UK, there's much to be anxious about. It's got the worst COVID rates at the moment, and everyone's lives are kind of upended. And I've got plans, for the rest of the year and so forth, and I don't know if I can execute them properly. So that's given me a sense of anxiety. But try to manage it. I hope things are a little bit smoother for you at your end, over in the land of the long white cloud. Yeah.
It's cloudy. It's pretty white
cloudy?
too.
Cloudy. Yeah. It's pretty white. It's pretty white and cloudy.
Yeah. This kind of like ties. It's like a follow-on from when we talked about uncertainty. Almost like a year ago, we talked about like how 2020 was going to be quite an uncertain year. And sure enough, there are a lot of things we couldn't really predict that happened.
Yes. It looks like 2021 might just be a continuation of it. Yeah,
it might just be. And I guess, as a result of this uncertainty that's going on, we can't help but feel the effect of anxiety as a result of that. Because as we know, anxiety is very much about it's projected into the future. Anxiety is about future things to come, or uncertainties about the future. It's just future focused. Whereas, if you think in terms of the mental health scale, there's depression, which tends to be focused on the past, or regret, and stuff like that, like guilt for the past, shame is based on the past. That leads to the symptoms of depression. So I guess I'll just highlight the two extremes of mental health conditions that I'm starting to become aware about more and more as I do my work. So anxiety about the future, uncertainty. We wonder, with regards to our survival, like how things are going to go. Survival in terms of our finance, survival as in, prospects for family, safety, health-wise even. I think if I were to try to think in terms of the scale, is like, if I go back to meditation, that's why there's a lot of value in being in the present as much as we can, because the present is real to us, and unless we're really in clear immediate danger, then anxiety is a feeling that's based on the projection outcomes that we cannot otherwise control. Do we feel that the environment, the things around us, the situation, the circumstances that we are facing, is beyond our control? It's out of control. It's not predictable, right? It's chaotic, at least relatively speaking, to what you're normally used to.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's interesting you mentioned meditation, because actually, I'll share this with you. You probably already know this because we've had these conversations before. So when I first formally explored meditation, Vipassana meditation specifically, back in 2013, actually, I think I was at a point in my life where perhaps my anxiety levels were through the roof. I found myself just being really future focused, which is fine. We all want to plan for our futures to ensure that we have, good lives for ourselves, and that's understandable. But I guess it was off balance. I was doing too much of it to the point where I would, fixate on certain outcomes I'd like to eventuate in the future. And I know that's not possible, but I would fantasize about these outcomes in my mind. I would be daydreaming, I would find myself just really not being present at all. And so for me, I think that the meditative practice helped to bring me back to the present moment again, and realized that actually perhaps the anxiety was based on, for me, a fear of control of outcomes, and also perhaps just feeling me and insecure, perhaps even about finding myself in an unmanageable and unpalatable situation and not knowing how to deal with that, and just feeling.
How does
things unraveling.
Oh, sorry. I was just curious as to how anxiety manifests within you as an individual, because I believe that it does manifest in different ways for different people.
Yes, that's really interesting. So let's explore that. So for me, when I feel anxious, it's something that is visceral, and it's also very much cerebral. So I can feel it in my body, but I can feel it in my mind as well. So I guess the onset for me is that I can feel the temperature of my body rising, and as you know, I have an aversion to heat because I'm very sensitive to heat, and so I am very aware when my body heats up, and that for me is the surge of anxiety coming through. I can feel my heart racing faster, so blood pumps through faster. So I guess that's part of feeling that you're heating up as well. But also I can feel the muscles in the back of my neck and my shoulders just kind of clenching up and tensing up, and at the same time I can feel that it's almost like there's a hand squeezing the top of my skull, and I can feel the pressure. And so I feel like I'm being hemmed and closed in, which actually taps into another fear of mine, which is it's often confused as claustrophobia. It's actually called claustrophobia. So it's not so much a fear of being stuck in a small place, which is specifically claustrophobia. It's actually a fear of being trapped. And so for me, my fear of being trapped is a physical thing as well as a abstract thing. So I'm afraid of being trapped, say, in a room of any size, not being able to get out. There's a loss of control, right? But also, I also have a fear of being trapped in a situation as well. There's loss of control, not being able to get out of a situation, and so perhaps the escapism has to do with wanting to be able to escape literally a situation where I'm trapped in. And so I think that's where it comes from. So I think meditation has helped me make sense of this anyway.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to me how in tune you are with all these sensations that go through your body when you identify the anxiety, because it's interesting how real it actually manifests itself in the body. Doesn't lie in a way, and you can feel the sensations, the tightness and feeling.
Totally. So what's it like for you, bro? What is it like when you feel the anxiety come through you?
I used to go through the stage where I'll get really nervous, and heart rate would go up, and just my breathing as well would quicken. That was maybe when I was a bit in my 20s or so. I'll get flushed, and usually I'll get more like a freeze response. The fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I don't know. Some schools say fawn. Some would say flirt. I think it's like more of a like fight and flight is more of the masculine response. Then freeze or fawn is more of the feminine response. Just tends towards that. So I will go into freeze. I remember having a real big fear of public speaking, and when I would be on stage, for example, I'll just like nothing will come out. Like just I'm supposed to be speaking, but my throat would just seize up, and then my lungs would tighten up, and then I'll just have trouble just saying anything. That's one of the big reasons why, even as a musician, I wasn't really into singing because of that response. I've now begun to realize, but it doesn't really affect my fingers as much. It might tremble a little bit, and be like shaky, but it doesn't tense up like my vocal cords will. And then the heart rate thing and all. But now I find as I progress, I realize the anxiety does come out in different ways. A lot of people will say I'm a really zen kind of like dude, I'm very calm and collected. I guess I managed to adapt ways around showing my anxiety through my body language that way. But I do catch myself fidgeting. And my anxiety comes out through like shaking your leg or just getting uncomfortable, not being actually able to sit still.
Gotcha.
And then I find that I start working and keeping myself really busy. But now I'm starting to see that actually it's an anxiety response. I just cannot sit still when I'm going through that. So I start to really notice these patterns come through in me when I get anxious, and as a result, as a result of awareness, I find other methods to treat these early warning signs, so to speak, before they get any worse. It's identification all the time. I don't get like body sensations as such, but now I can see it coming through in my behavior.
Gotcha. But nonetheless, you become aware, or certainly you have the ability to be aware when anxiety arises in you. Yes? Whether you notice it through your mental observation or whether it's through bodily sensations or whatever it might be. I guess there are several ways that the anxiety becomes aware to you, perhaps. It sounds like you're in tune with that as well.
Yeah. As I progress in mental health work, I start to understand this concept of identifying early warning signs. Usually when it starts to get really visceral and your heart rate goes up or your lungs tighten, your chest tightens, that's usually quite a late warning sign. I feel that part of the awareness is to identify where it actually starts to brew, and when the triggers happen, and you go, okay, well, what's my first reaction? For me, my first reaction is start working, keeping myself busy, start moving around a lot, and then if I don't work on that, then I realize I might end up being short of breath as a result.
Gotcha.
So it's a progression, I find. And so it's definitely very useful to detect when it first comes up.
Interesting. So being able to identify these early warning signs then allows you to kind of preempt and prepare how you want to respond and react to situations, which actually, interestingly, that gives you a sense of control over the situation, over yourself.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because you now have a repertoire of possible responses you can pick from as a response to a given situation.
I find that's a real core of self-awareness work, to be so aware about how you respond or react. I guess first you respond and then you react. So to be so acutely aware about these things is the key of identifying ways to remedy the situation before it gets intense. And that's where self-awareness work is. That's how you practice self-awareness work, I guess, in everyday situations.
So you alluded to something a little earlier. Sorry to interrupt. You mentioned something about, for example, when you feel like you're anxious, perhaps maybe you might tap your feet or you do something to maybe alleviate the nervousness or the stress you're going through at that moment. There's something interesting, actually, that's we could perhaps explore. But I know for me, I'll share this with you. and I guess the world, whoever's listening in, that I'm being a musician and a bass player. I use rhythm actually as a way of gaining control over a situation where I feel nervous. So, for example, I've done this before. Actually, it's been a long time now because I've been self-employed for a long time. But back when I went for job interviews a long time ago, I could find myself, sitting there, and I'm tapping, the sides of my knees, and I'm kind of doing this motion, and I'm just going back and forth, like I would be, say, playing a chord or doing a walking bass line or whatever. But for me, this is a way of feeling like I'm still controlling the situation, because I can certainly be in control of, say, fingering a fretboard, kind of thing. So even though I can't control how this interview is going to proceed, I can certainly control that. And so this is perhaps a form of channeling, perhaps. And I wonder if maybe this is something that you use as a technique in your work as well, because maybe channeling your nervousness or fear or anxiety or insecurity, whatever you want to call that, is actually a form of taking back control, however little it might be.
Yeah, I believe action. We are doing actions for a particular reason, and this behavior speaks a lot about what's going on in the mind. But there's certain things that we don't have really a lot of awareness about, like twitches or that kind of thing, or even a behavior, the subconscious behavior that we cannot understand. It might be a coping mechanism for sure. Yeah, so behavior is probably the best indicator, a good point of query to go, okay, where's this behavior coming from? And maybe sometimes it's a reaction to do with anxiety. And then, like I said, it's kind of really like individual for different people. It's unique for different people. And it's a matter of just trying to identify our own ways, our own methods to deal with this anxiety.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that I've begun to understand a little bit more. This is of particular fascination to me, is around adult attachment theory. And I was thinking about it, like, how I said, I used to freeze a lot, but now I'm doing a different sort of, the symptom of my anxiety is probably more fidgety. I need to do something. I need to take control of the situation by acting. And then I realized when you're talking your piece, and I connected that together in my own life with regards to my own adult attachment style. I believe I shifted from a more anxious attachment style to I swung over to the avoidance style, and then I hopefully I feel that I'm more in the middle now. I'm more secure. But as an anxious attachment style person, I do remember my core sympathetic response was very much a fight response, by being proactive to doing something about it. I'll take action. With regards to dating, I'll text incessantly. Hey, what's up? That's a behavior that I didn't know there was anxiety either at that time. I thought it's normal. Oh no!
But it's interesting, right? When you overdo something, this shows anxiety. Perhaps yes, yeah, but then again, if you don't do enough of it, then it might convey indifference, or complacency or lack of care. And so what I'm hearing is that actually, in your act of over texting, perhaps there's an anxiety. Maybe there was an anxiety about wanting to convey or display affection or interest, and overdoing it. So it's an over worry about how you're seen, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And that usually turns out badly as a result, because the vibe I'm putting across is like I'm desperate, I need to calm my anxiety down. But anxiety itself is not actually a very attractive thing at all. So it does the exact opposite thing of what I want, which is to repel, prospective lovers away. And that's part of my blind spot, but it manifests through my behavior. And I didn't even know about it. It's a lack of self-control in that regard. And I suppose the avoidant attachment style is very much associated with like a dismissal, or how do we say, a more flat response, like freak out, bye-bye, kind of thing. So I think depending on the sympathetic nervous system orientation that we have, we choose either strategy, or let's fight or flight. Seeing from that angle, maybe it explains a lot of the behaviors in relationships that manifest as a result of this anxiety. Well, I'm curious to explore more, but I see a link between these things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And certainly in this context that you're speaking of, nurturing a relationship, it's about getting it right. It's the balance again. No, not overdoing it, but also not underdoing it as well. Yeah, and
not underdoing it.
It's an art. So it's a fine tuning.
I guess that's why they say in relationships you kind of get taught a lot about yourself, because you start to, if you're taught the ways to actually become self-aware about these unconscious behaviors that do manifest, then you can actually gauge oneself about where do you fit within this, and how secure you actually are. I feel it's all part of the same response of fear of fear of love, or fear of not having love, or something. It's a lack of worthiness.
Right.
So it manifests as anxiety, or it manifests that I cannot get too near, or I'll be, or the fear is that I might get abused because I'm too nearby. I think that's the anxiety of a lot of people who have an avoidant style. Is they probably feel that the closer I am to this person, the more they're going to take it out on me. And maybe that's my interpretation of that. And therefore, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I just need to get away from the situation.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting, though, that anxiety, it can be harnessed in a way to perhaps work for you. So as much as perhaps anxiety, certainly the nervous and stress-inducing kind is one perhaps to be avoided, or to be minimized, or to be eradicated even. What you've actually just alluded to there is that perhaps having the right kinds of anxiety maybe could be, rather than act as obstacles to you, they actually act as enablers. Right. So, for example, if you're anxious about, caring for someone you love in the right way, that spurs you to act and behave in the right manner, perhaps. So it's an impetus for you to do and say the right things, I guess.
Yeah, Marcus. If it's impetus to be self-aware, and then adjust behavior accordingly to a more healthy way of expressing that. There are ways to manage it for sure. But anxiety is just like fears. Also, can be a catalyzing factor that spurs us to do in a particular direction of passion or interest as well. Like, for example, like many people who study mental health issues are driven by their own anxiety about their own mental health, and therefore they run with it like a passion. Or some people have anxiety about the environmental effects of pollution and greenhouse gases. They have anxiety about climate change, and therefore they are driven to work within the sphere to mitigate all these effects of climate change. to take action, but the action itself isn't bad. The action actually is needed. But you can see where the driving force comes from. It comes from this anxiety in the first place. Yeah. So in a way, anxiety can be bad, can be good. Without anxiety, maybe we get complacent and we don't move forward.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And full disclosure, I have to say that another struggle of mine actually is procrastination, and I do suffer from this a lot from an artistic point of view, because I think about, again, this is something we spoke about perhaps in a previous conversation, about how there was an aspect of me that's a perfectionist, and I want to churn out the absolute best product, if you like. So, say in the case of music, for example, certainly back in the days when I was active in a band, I'm now actually in the process of getting back into music again, actually on a formal basis. But certainly there was a lull period, and when I was, and I think part of the reason why I let this slip is because I let anxiety get the better of me. I put too much pressure on myself wanting to achieve the standard, and it crippled me in the end. And in the end, I became, I guess, inefficient with my outputs, and it felt like I wasn't churning out enough songs, and I just abandoned the project altogether. But if I think of the days when actually I got this anxiety under control, if you like, I was actively writing music, I was gigging and so forth, and I was in a flow state, actually. What it felt like was that the anxiety was actually a motivator. It helped me to get to where I wanted to be with my goals and so forth. And I think about it now, in the context of me doing my PhD research, where I have deadlines to meet and so forth. And so as I approach those deadlines, I could feel my anxiety levels rise. But when my anxiety levels rise, actually, I have the adrenaline to just follow through. And yeah, I wonder if this is something maybe you're able to relate to as well, that you're able to, done right, harness the anxiety as a way to motivate you and to give you that momentum and that adrenaline to follow through to the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. The pressure of deadlines is a good anxiety. Get it done, kind of stuff. I feel there's another anxiety with regards to outcome, like expectations, and I find that that's the hardest one. Like, and that's something that I dealt with in my own life, because I've always had like performance anxiety with regards to my grades at school. I was like, never good enough. And if I don't get good enough, I'll be trashed. At home, when I got home, it wasn't pleasant by any means. So even the prospects of going home was just like very unsafe. So yes, I definitely had relate to feeling anxiety around the outcome. The expectations of not enough or not good enough, that kind of stuff, which either could have driven me to try harder, but in my case, I gave up academically in Singapore before I got moved here. So that was definitely motivated by anxiety as well, outcome.
So your response to that wasn't then adjusting your perspective, perhaps, or perhaps recalibrating what is realistic for you, perhaps. Maybe that's what it is, right? It's about having more realistic expectations of yourself, or maybe having none at all, or having the right kinds of expectations, right? Managing.
Yes. Well, this is environmental factors. This is also projections. Just before you mentioned what you had mentioned, I just had this crazy analogy as well with regards to sex. Male performance anxiety. Anxiety with regards to pleasing a partner, for example.
Sure.
Or anxiety associated with a connection. I think it manifests in two ways. The fight or flight mode. The classic one that we know about is flight mode, which is you can't get it up.
yeah. And you just want to withdraw yourself from that situation.
You want to withdraw. Like, bye. Behind away.
You just want to pull out and just
you got a white flag. Dandies. Oh, sorry, I'm done. It hasn't even started. I'm done. Shit.
That's so true.
But then the fight approach actually is the proactive approach. The fight approach actually, funnily enough, comes in the form of premature ejaculation.
Yes, that's true. You let it all out, but it's fair to say, yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Like, no time to enjoy the process. Yeah, like
No, absolutely. And I was thinking when you mentioned male performance anxiety, actually, performance anxiety is something that you can find in various contexts. And just to bring it back to music again, because I've been in this kind of musical headspace in the last few days, I think about all the times I've had performance anxiety on stage, for example, where and I know this in myself because, as I mentioned, I can feel when the anxiety comes through. Maybe it doesn't translate from someone observing me from the outside, but certainly I can feel the anxiety where I'm just maybe too overly concerned about how I'm posing, the way I'm holding my bass, the way I'm actually rocking out or whatever, and I'm not really in the moment. I don't find myself enjoying the process of actually just performing. I'm just worried about how it's perceived, and so it's actually kind of self-crippling, really. And so, and this is an example where if you don't get the right amount of self-control, you are your worst enemy. So you got to overcome yourself. You got to overcome yourself. So
right, yes, yeah. Another thing I want to add on top of that is, especially in the jam process, because it's something that I'm interested in expanding, the jam practice, basically musical jams. I find that there's sometimes the anxiety associated with it's usually more prevalent. It ties in with, like, forgive the analogy again, it's like coming too fast. You speed it up.
Absolutely.
You speed it up. So timing wise, I find that there's a tendency to speed things up because there's this anxiety of, like, oh, what am I going to be doing? Like, and you play faster as a result. The tempo increases. Maybe to a point where you just go, okay, I won't go as fast as this, but I do find that there's a pattern around, like, like when live bands play. I'm sure there's adrenaline. Adrenaline might be to do somewhat with anxiety too. It's the stress response, the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals axis. So adrenals is very much to do with, like, the response of that stress, the anxiety, so-called. So you get adrenaline. Maybe it's a live show, and a lot of bands, they tend to play faster. They play the music a lot faster than if they were recording it. And I find that it's just a live thing because of not say anxiety per se, but the effects of adrenaline, possibly. But anxiety also I believe has an effect on adrenaline too, so I can see the link there. And I'll say that's also part of the training when it comes to haka. Haka, you're slapping your thighs, and the tendency is with the adrenaline or the anxiety of war, makes the haka pace go faster, but it's not supposed to be like that, because the teaching is that if you vary your speed or go faster, then you're also telling your opponent that you're nervous. So you're actually more in control if you can maintain a slower tempo, a more regular tempo. So
Absolutely.
I'm just tying it in with speed and timing about things.
Absolutely, and also being in sync, really. So, as you know, one of the really fundamental skills of music playing and performance and recording actually is just staying in time. And it sounds so simple, but actually that's what it is. And it's about being in sync. It's about actually being in control. And actually, when you reach a state of flow in that regard, you're just you're not even thinking to an extent. You're actually just in an autopilot mode, actually. And so that's actually quite a freeing kind of state to be in, where you feel like you're just literally going with the flow, and you don't feel like you now are so energetically invested in making this outcome eventuate in a certain way. You're just one with the process.
Yeah, I'm starting to become more aware about the taking control aspect of it and speeding things up, especially when you're going back to your point about synchronization. That's when there's a natural process of like relationship building, for instance, or team building or something, where people spend time together, get to know each other on a certain frequency or a certain tempo, and then you'll find that the anxious people would try to speed up the process, and that's where it gets out of sync. For someone who's secure or just going with a natural process of that, you'd be sensing that the lack of synchronization, and as a result, you're probably going to pick up the anxiety from that person, and then you're going to go, oh, whoa, this is getting intense, like the timing's off. That's just probably one example of things going out of sync, and we are feeling it. We're intuitively picking up the vibes, but we may not be able to articulate it, but it might just come down to the anxiety and how things are being rushed.
So perhaps this anxiety has to do with a rush to get to an outcome, a desired outcome, perhaps. And in doing so, you actually, you're not really engaged in the process of letting it happen. And in a way, it kind of detracts from the experience a little bit. If you think about how, we all constantly talk about things like, oh, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And it sounds easy enough to fathom, but then put it into practice is another thing, isn't it? Because we often so focused on reaching an outcome and a destination. We just have to find ways to pull ourselves back from that.
It's easier said than done, for sure. The bottom line, I think, is to be aware about anxious tendencies that we exhibit unconsciously. Because it'll just come through our blind spot. That's how it just comes through. We need to look at the blind spot and see how it manifests. It's the manifestation.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note of being aware of not letting things spiral out of control, I'm also mindful of the fact that this conversation could spiral into so many different tangents and go on. And so this is probably a good point to weave things back into a nice, manageable finality. So if you have one takeaway for our audience, what would you impart as a tip for managing one's anxiety, perhaps, that has worked for you?
You know what? I just did it. I just scratched, and that's another form of my anxiety, because you just put me on the spot. You just put me on the spot.
Right.
You just put me on the spot to sum up whatever I had to say in once, and I'm like, whoa. Scratching is anxiety. Okay. But that sums up my point. That sums up my point. It's being aware about your own unique triggers and how anxiety manifests itself in very subtle ways in us all. Is different for everyone. So it's important to connect to yourself to understand how it manifests for the individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Actually, for me, it's actually being mindful of what works for you as well, because as we've touched on, anxiety manifests so differently for different people, you know. And perhaps there is a one size fits all, solution for this, but certainly if you're aware of how it occurs for you and how perhaps you can respond to it and just getting that perhaps fine tuned. That's one way of taking back control, and if it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, discard it, kind of thing. And I think ultimately it's just being kind to yourself, really. Well, just realizing these things happen, and don't beat yourself up about it. Life does that enough already, so yeah. Yeah.
Low expectations.
yeah, that's it.
Nothing to aspire about, nothing to be anxious about, right?
That's it. That's one. No, actually, it's letting go of I guess unwarranted expectations of yourself. Well, thank you one and all for tuning in once again for another deep dive on a contentious topic with balance and the purpose and all that jazz. And until we chat again, and love
and please support us by hitting subscribe, please, and liking this. The more engagement you get, and comment too, because when you get engagement like that, we can produce the appropriate content for you guys. So we'll very much appreciate your feedback as we go. We're definitely all improving. And until next one. Thanks for watching.
Well, see you guys in the comment section. Boom. Out.